Malaysia's movement control order scheduled to end in just over a week, and authorities are not keen on extending it.
Back in Singapore, Tanjong Pagar CC is preparing for the first batch of seniors getting their Covid-19 shot tomorrow.
Hey, there's a newcomer to the Singapore Zoo. Find out all about our very own Simba.
Welcome to The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Kui.
I'm Haryanto Diman. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. For the fourth straight day, there are no new COVID-19 infections in the community.
All 14 new cases today were imported and placed on stay-home notice when they arrived in Singapore. More details will be released later tonight.
Meanwhile, seniors 70 years old and above can receive their COVID-19 vaccine from tomorrow. This will start with pilots in Ang Mo Kio and Tanjong Pagar, where larger numbers of the elderly reside.
Tanjong Pagar Community Centre is one of the first CCs to bring vaccinations to the heartlands. Trade and Industry Minister Chan Chun Sing, who's also Deputy Chairman of the People's Association, was there this afternoon to oversee the final setup before doors open for the vaccination exercise tomorrow.
He said the People's Association and Health Ministry have a three-pronged approach to aid the vaccination drive for the elderly.
The three things that PA is working with MOH for the community vaccination centre outreach. So first part is the setting up the community vaccination centre. Second part is the community booking system. Then the third part is the community outreach, one-to-one house call, one-to-many in small groups to explain to the elderly on the background, the need and the criteria for the vaccination.
Well, to accommodate seniors, some adjustments were made in this setup, including a community booking centre to help those who have difficulty booking their vaccination appointments online.
The design of this vaccination centre, I think the people have put in quite a bit of thought into catering for the elderly. So for example, there's a express lane there for people who are not so mobile, who comes in wheelchair, so that they don't have to wait too long. The size of the booth is also slightly bigger than the ones that you see at T4, where it caters to people who are more mobile, so that we can wheel in the wheelchair and wheel out the wheelchair. Even the sitting arrangements, if you notice that the chairs that are being selected for them, it provides greater stability and assistance to the elderly when they are in the waiting area. So these are some of the differences.
Mr. Chan also said that the government aims to set up one community vaccination centre in each town by March.
In other local headlines, according to a survey by the Singapore Business Federation, 7 in 10 companies here are confident of sustaining their business in the next 12 months, despite the pandemic negatively affecting their revenue. About 31% of firms expect business and the economic climate to improve this year, up from the 8% in last year's survey. On the flip side, 1 in 3 companies aren't sure whether they can keep operating in the next 6 to 12 months.
Paramjit Kaur, the woman who claimed she was a sovereign when told to wear a mask in public, is expected to face another charge under the Women's Charter, but it's not clear what it will be for. She currently faces 6 charges, 4 of which are for breaching COVID-19 regulations. The remaining 2 are for public nuisance and for failing to report her change of home address. She is currently out on bail and her case will be heard again on February 22nd.
The Singapore Zoo welcomed its first lion cub conceived through assisted reproduction. Born last October, Simba preserves its bloodline at the zoo. Its father, Mufasa, died of deteriorating health after its semen was collected. Well, 3 months on, Simba is growing up to be an inquisitive little lion, spending most of the day playing. Cub and mother are currently housed in an off-exhibit area to allow them to further strengthen their bond away from the glare of visitors.
Tighter COVID-19 restrictions start today and will apply to the upcoming Chinese New Year period.
Well, every household can only have a maximum of 8 different visitors each day. They can be in groups of 4 or belong to 2 or more families as long as the total number of visitors per day doesn't exceed 8.
In this Ask ST segment, we answer other questions that our readers have on these new restrictions.
Okay, so first question, how long can I visit my family and friends for? Well, there are no restrictions on the duration of visits or the number of visits to the same household, but you are advised to limit social interactions as much as possible. Bear in mind that increased exposure and interactions could potentially put others and yourself at risk of infection.
Do I have to wear a mask when visiting other people's homes? Yes, masks have to be worn whenever you're outside your own home. Visitors are strongly encouraged to observe safe management principles when visiting other people's homes, including wearing a mask, keeping a safe distance of at least 1 meter from others, and minimizing physical contact.
And when Chinese New Year comes around, can I have a reunion dinner with my family or friends at a restaurant? Yes, you can, but you're still not allowed to book multiple tables for large groups of more than 8 people. An exception can be made for big families of the same household, but intermingling between tables will not be allowed. There will also be stricter enforcement checks at F&B establishments to ensure that customers and businesses continue to adhere to these measures. Well, for more on the stricter measures ahead of the holiday, you can of course read them over at straitstimes.com.
Across the causeway, Malaysia's Health Ministry said the Second Movement Control Order, or MCO 2.0, may not be extended from the tentative February 4th end date.
The government is concerned that a prolonged MCO would be too detrimental to the country's economy, but the less restrictive conditional MCO could be reinstated.
Meanwhile, International Trade and Industry Minister Azmin Ali also dismissed calls for a total lockdown in Malaysia. Instead, he mooted more stringent procedures like targeted testing and tighter distancing protocols, with the overarching priority to strike a balance between protecting lives and livelihoods.
MCO 2.0 was first imposed on January 13th in several states for a period of 2 weeks and was initially scheduled to end on the 26th. It was extended, though, to all states and the federal territories except Sarawak and will now last until February the 4th.
Malaysia Bureau Chief Shannon Teo joins us from KL. Shannon, Mr. Azmin is against a total lockdown. At the same time, the Health Ministry said MCO 2.0 may not be extended beyond February 4th. So what are the other options the government is looking at then in this balance between lives and livelihoods?
I think we have to look at where the new infections are coming from. And if you look at the daily reports, the majority of new clusters are all coming from workplaces. And when we talk about workplaces, we largely mean factories, we largely mean construction sites, so on and so forth. So the onus really is now on industry players, on employers to implement tighter SOPs, right? Better physical distancing, maybe not so many people in their transport vehicles, the buses and vans that they use to take workers to the workplaces, many different things, mass testing, so on and so forth. So it's really about increasing costs, as it were. And so there was some resistance to this. Of course, if you run a business, you want to operate on the lowest cost possible. But we've come to a point where that's no longer possible. Either you have to do this or you shut down, you continue an MCO. In fact, we get a stricter MCO. So those are the options being presented to industry players. Implement a stricter SOP, or we're going to shut you down.
Right. Well, we want to just compare strategies. Over in Hong Kong, the Jordan area was put under a weekend-long lockdown that was to facilitate mass testing. That aside, Shannon, would this kind of a district-specific lockdown work for Malaysia?
Malaysia has actually done something like this. It's called the EMCO, the Enhanced Movement Control Order. And now that's what is it's a total lockdown. You can't leave your houses. The government sends you food rations, things like that. And this is to enable exactly the same thing, mass testing. So if you put a particular district or even a particular building under EMCO, what you'll be doing is you'll be testing everyone in the building twice over 2 weeks. This has happened before. We've seen footage of people lining up to get tested on day one, and then at about 12 or 13 days later to get their second test. And that's how they weed out everyone who has COVID-19 in that area. That can work, but the problem we have in Malaysia right now is, for example, the entire Klang Valley, Selangor, Kuala Lumpur, everywhere is a red zone. There are hundreds. I think Selango's been hitting on its own over 1,000 cases a day for most of the past week, if I recall correctly. So what are you going to do? Are you going to put the whole of Selangor under EMCO? That's pretty much shutting down most of the economy.
Shannon, we also understand the Health Ministry will be looking to begin its first round of vaccinations at the end of February. What's the latest there?
That's on track. I mean, that's always been the plan, to kind of start at the end of February with Prime Minister Muhyiddin being the first, and then to move on to frontliners, and then to our most vulnerable, which would be people with underlying conditions, senior citizens. Now, at one point they were saying it might take up to 18 months to reach herd immunity. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but they want to now immunize something like 80% of Malaysians by the first quarter of next year, or end of this year if it's possible. So they really want to get to that level where most Malaysians, at least most adult Malaysians, because I think the plan right now is not to immunize children, up to 80%, 83%, something to that level by the first quarter of next year. So it is going to be a long process. I'm not expecting to get it maybe until the end of the year myself. So mask, social distancing for me for most of the next few months.
Okay, thanks so much for the update, Shannon. We've been speaking with our Malaysia Bureau Chief, Shannon Teo.
Elsewhere, Hong Kong will soon announce compulsory COVID-19 testing in more areas. Mandatory testing has already been ordered in Jordan and Sham Shui Po. Chief Executive Carrie Lam also said there could be more targeted lockdowns in future, but they would be on a smaller scale than the one in Jordan over the weekend.
Indonesia is set to officially surpass 1 million COVID-19 cases today. As of yesterday, it has recorded over 999,200 cases, with the average daily increase running above 11,000 for more than a week. Health experts believe the true spread is likely to be far worse. Indonesia has been criticized for having one of the world's lowest COVID-19 testing and contact tracing rates, as well as for focusing on securing vaccines at the expense of trying to enforce health protocols.
Moderna and Pfizer said their COVID-19 vaccines are effective against new variants discovered in Britain and South Africa, but they are slightly less protective against the variant in South Africa, which may be more adept at dodging antibodies in the bloodstream. And so both drug makers have been revising plans, with Moderna already developing a new form of its vaccine that could be used as a booster shot against the South Africa variant. Meanwhile, Pfizer and BioNTech could develop a newly adjusted vaccine against the variants in about 6 weeks.
Well, in non-COVID-19 news, according to CNN, US President Joe Biden doesn't believe there will be enough votes to convict former President Donald Trump at his second impeachment trial. If all 50 Democrats vote for a conviction, 17 Republican senators will need to flip to achieve the two-thirds majority needed to convict. The Senate is expected to start a trial on February the 9th on the article of impeachment against Mr. Trump.
Last night, Education Minister Lawrence Wong told an Institute of Policy Studies conference that it could be 4 or 5 years before the world sees the end of the COVID-19 crisis.
He also said the pandemic has set the stage for Singapore to reset itself, emerging a fairer, greener and more united country. This means combating inequality and ensuring social mobility, as well as building a greener economy and fostering a renewed sense of solidarity.
When you think about reset, what is it you have really in your mind, and what do you think that we as a society most need?
My view is that the COVID-19 doesn't so much introduce new disruptions as it does accelerate existing trends. Geopolitical tensions that you see everywhere, that we see between the major powers, it's not a new issue, but again, it's been sharpened and accelerated through this pandemic. Inequality, it's not something that we are only dealing with today. So it's with this in mind that we prepare our sequel, if you will, right? It's a sequel where we already know what the big forces around us are, but we must recognize that the forces are coming now with double, triple the force that we had anticipated before, and therefore it behooves us to fundamentally re-examine all our operating assumptions, our paradigms, and think about how we can better prepare our society for this new world.
Well, the full session with Mr. Wong is on the Straits Times' YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe by hitting the red button below.
For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com. Once again, I'm Haryanto Diman with Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on A Big Story.